Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I'm your host, Carmine of Red Team Review, and I'm joined here once again by the magnificent, the amazing, the always awesome Carmine of Red Team Review and his sidekick, Preston. Preston?
Oh. You were laughing before you even threw that joke out. You had amused yourself that much.
That's right. Guys, welcome back to the Game of Thrones podcast. This is our first podcast post the Season 8 Game of Thrones stuff. We will be back next episode for our final Season 8 overview look thingy. But this time we're going to be looking at what is next for the Game of Thrones television series and HBO in general. And we may have found an interesting clue, or someone sent us a clue, as to what's going on. As always, we're available on SoundCloud and iTunes, so consider checking us out on those platforms. And if you do check us out on iTunes, then please leave us a review. It would help out a lot. Also, leave your comments and questions down below. We may cover them in the next episode. And also, one thing before we do begin is I got to give a shout out to my boy, YouTuber Men of the West. He's Lord of the Rings channel, the biggest Lord of the Rings channel on YouTube. And right now, as of this recording, he's at 177,000 subscribers. He's about to pass me. That's right. He's about to pass me with 8,000 more subscribers. So if you guys love Lord of the Rings, definitely go check him out. Help him surpass me so he and I can celebrate with dirty whores and drinks and all that good stuff. So, Men of the West, love you, man. Congratulations on your success.
I guess he's considering Lord of the Rings is coming back. I guess he can talk about all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll get into Lord of the Rings as well, because I know how much you love Lord of the Rings, kind of.
Lord of the Rings is fine. I was obsessed with Lord of the Rings for a while, but it is sort of sterile, compared to Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of which, so we're here because Preston got an email from an anonymous source saying that they work in HBO. Go into it. Tell me what happened.
Well, I got this email saying that these things are being discussed at HBO, and that most of the people at HBO know all of this. And so I got this anonymous email. Now, I'm not sure if it's actually from somebody at HBO. A lot of the information I think you could find from other sources and compile it. But it's a good compilation of everything. So maybe it's from somebody exciting, so, something secret, and maybe it's just somebody that did a lot of good research and compiled everything in one place. So I don't know.
Well, unlike this guy, my source is someone who has worked with HBO. I've confirmed that source. Yeah, I've told you before. My guy who was, who told me how HBO, how most of the higher ups felt bittersweet about the last season. It got them a lot of money, but at the same time, they're fans of the show. They wanted to go on into more episodes. Dave and Dan said no, so it's kind of bittersweet. My source, I confirm. This guy just sounds like some random schmuck off of Reddit who just, made a random account and says he's from HBO. He's probably not. I have an idea of who this person really is. We were discussing that YouTuber a while ago, and I don't want to say his name.
Jeez, I have no idea. Like I say, it's fine. It's nice. It's something we can talk about.
Well, we've discussed the prequel.
You say random schmuck as if it's some sort of insult. You mean just random dude.
Yeah. And we've discussed the prequels before, and, we've discussed them pretty extensively, but now that Thrones is over, I think we should discuss them at least one more time to see what we can look forward to and get our thoughts around this stuff. Preston, are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
Okay, read off the email. Start with this guy's introductions.
All right, so he says, below are some shows that are discussed by HBO and that are in stages of development. I've been made aware of them while working at the company. I'm not revealing any details about myself. And he says the majority of this is common information that anyone working on these Game of Thrones projects knows about. So he's saying it's not really too much of a secret. But, So in a sense, like I say, it could be somebody that just knows somebody at HBO or has done a lot of research from other leakers and things like that. But it's a nice compilation of things here.
So the first one here is The Long Night. Now, according to this, the show is set roughly 8,000 years before the events of the original show. It will primarily feature a variety of different storylines: the creation of the White Walkers, Azor Ahai's origins in Essos, and his journey to find the Children of the Forest, the final battle against the White Walkers, and finally the creation of Winterfell and the building of the Wall. This show and both of the other planned shows exist to give context to the events that led to the War of Five Kings and shaped the world as we know it. The team working on the show has been told to stay away from familiar creature designs and locations. The reasons for doing this is unknown, but a reboot of Game of Thrones series may already be planned at HBO. A reboot? What?
Oh, I mean, that seems unlikely.
That seems very unlikely. This is why I think this is bullshit, because the one person who I think this YouTuber, he's more of a fanboy than YouTuber, but he's known throughout the community as being kind of like a little too fanboyish, which is something coming from me. And he hates the living fuck out of the show, and but anyways,
but there are some things that really ring true about what he says here.
Well, everybody knows this at this point, though, right?
Yeah, it's true. So one of the things about The Long Night, and The Long Night is the one show that people know the most about. And one of the things that was really surprising was when they had the cast list for the upcoming pilot. It was going to be Naomi Watts was on it, and we're like, okay, that seems normal. But then it started listing all of these people of color, and like half the people on the list were people of color, and you kind of say, well, whoa, wait a minute, this, when I think of The Long Night, I think of Westeros, and Westeros doesn't really have people of color except for immigrants who have come over. But if half the characters are that, it means that it is going to take place in Essos, and that some of these events are going to be happening, on that side of the Narrow Sea, and maybe Azor Ahai's origins and the founding of whatever the lore religion and all of these things are going to come up. So, I mean, I don't know how there'd be communication, like how are the characters going back and forth,
Through the Arm of Dorne.
Oh.
Right, so if this is 8,000 years before the creation of the White Walkers, there's probably still an ongoing war, or maybe the war hasn't even started yet, between the First Men and the Children of the Forest. And or maybe the war has gone on and it supposedly ended, but not really. There's a shadow war going on, and maybe the Arm of Dorne hasn't been shattered yet.
Well, I mean, again, legends don't really mean very much in Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, because it's oral history and it changes, and who knows what really happened. But yeah, I mean, supposedly the Arm of Dorne is 12,000 years before, and the building of the wall is 8,000 years. And so you have, the first men have to migrate over, and then they have the war with the Children of the Forest, and then the arm gets broken, and then there's, a peace, and then all of a sudden the wall is built for whatever reasons. So, but who knows? I mean, like I said, those legends aren't to be trusted. So yeah, maybe people are crossing over through this Arm of Dorne.
Well, the tagline of the prequel series is, "This is not the story you think you know." So, I mean, who knows? Maybe the founder of the Starks and Winterfell, maybe they were people of color. Who knows?
It's true. I mean, we have no idea.
We have no idea. Westeros doesn't really have a lot of people of color, and that's okay, because there are other places that in the Game of Thrones world that have it, and I would like to explore those places instead. I would love to see more of Essos, but at the same time, though, when we talk about Game of Thrones, does Essos really come into mind, or is it just Westeros?
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing, because you do think of it as being a Westeros-centered story,
despite a good chunk of it taking place in Essos.
Right, but it's funny though, because we think of Dany as being this tourist that's traveling through this area, but that she's eventually getting pulled to Westeros, and that that Westeros is the base. I mean, we're Westeros centric,
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's just, it's a function of most of the point of views being there. A Dance with Dragons tries to like flip that, but by having so many characters go into Essos. But Essos does seem so foreign. And granted, Westeros is based on Western society and Western Middle Ages, and George R. R. Martin is playing on that, and he makes Essos into this stereotypical Eastern foreign land, this Orientalist idea where everything is off, and we're supposed to see it as this weird other land where they eat dog and have sex in public and things, the graces, religious women, have sex with people in temples, and everything is supposed to be, it's purposely supposed to challenge our Western ideas of things. While Westeros is a little more what we're used to.
Right.
But it'd be, and that's the thing is to flip the story and have it be Essos-centric would be something. It's not going to be that, but it's surprising enough that a large portion of the story is going to be in Essos. I
would be cool with that, with it going from Essos and eventually, or Essos as you say it, and eventually going to Westeros and, them encountering the children and the children fighting back and, maybe they have a really good reason to be there, so on and so forth. So,
I mean, it could be a parallel story. Like Dany doesn't have any content. Well, okay. I was about to say Dany doesn't really have any contact with with Westeros until, the arrival of Barristan, and then the arrival of Tyrion. But then it's not really true because there was that assassination attempt and things like that. So there are some things going back and forth. But I could see at least in I could see the same thing where you have these two separate stories paralleling the Game of Thrones thing. And then eventually these two separate stories of Westeros and Essos will come together by, season 3, season 4 kind of thing.
Well, the next thing here in the email, and this is why I think the person who sent this is that YouTuber we discussed. Not going to say the guy's name. Next thing here is Empire of Ash. This one has been detailed quite a bit by the YouTuber, and so I will just go into the basics of his claim as he seems to know more than I do. The story will focus on the following stories: the decline of the Valyrian Empire, the warring factions in Valyria, relations between Valyria and its provinces, and the Targaryens' escape to Dragonstone. Again, the show sets up the War of Five Kings and does not utilize visuals from Game of Thrones. The script has progressed well, but has been delayed multiple times due to budgetary concerns. See, this is why... like I said, this is the only YouTuber who peddles this fucking Empire of Ash thing, because why does any fan, and even most book people, like, unless you're a hardcore book nerd like yourself, I don't think any normal fan really cares much about old Valyria. Why the fuck would you make a Game of Thrones prequel not set in Westeros? Like, even if The Long Night is going to set in Essos, eventually it's going to go to Westeros, because Children of the Forest, White Walkers, The Wall, blah, 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 blah.
And I'm going to make a comparison here to Knights of the Old Republic in Star Wars. Like, yes, there are some people that are super into Knights of the Old Republic and all of that kind of stuff, but I picked some of that stuff up, and it was just too foreign. It was too distant from what I was used to with Star Wars. They tried to make their occasional connections, like, oh, there's huts in this or whatever, but it just there wasn't anything to latch on to. It's the same kind of idea with I think the Fall of Valyria. Like we haven't really been told that very much. The Fall of Valyria doesn't have that. I mean, surprisingly, it doesn't have very much to do with the Game of Thrones universe, because yes, the Targaryens survive, but that's it. The fact that there's Targaryens, like what the Valyrians did, doesn't really affect anything. Not like building of the wall or the White Walkers or the Children of the Forest, where all of that stuff is coming back and is playing a role. Like the death of the Valyrians doesn't, do anything, because the Targaryens have just are there. Like, we don't need, there's if we discover something new about the Valyrians, it doesn't necessarily affect anything.
Exactly. Yeah, this was my point the entire time. Empire of Ash is just fucking pointless. Not to mention, this is the time of the Valyrians, like when they're at their highest, and that means dragons. And
well, that's the budgetary concern kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want all these flying dragons around in your show? What you want is a few. See, so optimally, you want some CGI monsters, but you don't want too many CGI monsters, right? You don't want them like on a daily basis where you have to do them all the time, but you want them, to occasionally show up for some scene.
Right. Not to mention the Targaryens, like even the Targaryen thing, like weren't they like a minor house in Valyria or something?
The Targaryens were a minor house, yeah.
Yeah, like why would you fucking... It would be like that sci-fi show about, like, Superman's grandfather. You know what I'm talking about? That sci-fi show? Like, who cares? I'm sure there are people who do care, but even then, there's still a connection to Superman, kind of.
But he dies and is completely wiped out, so... I mean, people didn't even care about Caprica that much. That's the prequel to Battlestar Galactica. They tried to make the connections by like having these people's houses and having them be the ancestors of people that survived for Battlestar Galactica, but it still didn't make much difference because, all of these people were going to get killed.
That's why I'm kind of worried about the Long Night prequel, because it's so far away. Even the Star Wars prequels, people didn't like it because, George Lucas is kind of an insane person, but at least we had Darth Vader in there, in some capacity. Right. Obi-Wan was
there.
You
had Obi-Wan Kenobi, you had Yoda, you had the Emperor, you had a lot of characters that
was from the original trilogy, and the connection was strong. Despite it being a prequel, the connection was strong to the original source material. Here, the connection is not that strong, considering it's 8,000 years before.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, like, Empire of Ash, even the Long Night prequel was kind of meh, but Empire of Ash, like, this is the only YouTuber peddling that. Like, it's not like a good prequel.
I don't know how it would be. I mean, what could you find out about dragons that would be interesting and make you re-examine the story? Like, let's say you find out that the Valyrians, they use genetic engineering, or they use telepathy, or they use, weird kinds of magic. Let's say you find out all of these things. Well, it doesn't really affect the story that much, with like understanding Dany or Viserys or any of the Targaryens that we know. And that's the thing, Targaryens weren't important, so they were just this minor house.
The way you could do it, that they really could shove it in there somewhere, is have some Valyrians interact with some of our main characters in the Long Nights. Like maybe an envoy from Valyria lands in Essos, where the story takes place, or in Westeros at one point, and
Yeah, and I mean, if you go book-wise, there were dragons in Westeros in the really thousands of years ago time, or at least there's legends of them. So, you can have you can have the dragons, you can have the White Walkers, you can have R'hllor. I mean, there's some subject matter with the Long Night that will be familiar. Like, there's going to be a Winterfell, there's going to be a wall, but with Valyria, there's nothing familiar. So I don't know. It's odd. It's also I'm scared about it being. I'd be scared about it being not visually interesting from a human being perspective, where the Targaryens all look the same. Mm-hmm. They all have the same hair, and that's the thing, is like the Long Night we know is going for diversity, and we saw the cast list, and it's all it's many different looking kind of people. Well, the Valyrians all have the same color hair. I mean, maybe it's gold and sometimes it's silver or whatever in the books, but in the show, everybody just kind of had the same. They popped that same Viserys wig on Rhaegar.
I just thinking
on
that.
Rhaegar.
He looked like the Diet Coke version of Viserys, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. But you want to know something that's even worse? browsing the internet and not using Surfshark VPN. In today's world, browsing the internet has become a lot more risky, and every day we just risk losing our information to hackers and shady websites. But Surfshark VPN has got you covered. They've got a bunch of servers worldwide to help you stay anonymous every time you're online and keep your data safe with a variety of security options. And for my overseas viewers, Surfshark VPN can help you watch streaming services you wouldn't normally have access to in your country, such as Netflix and even Hulu. And now that Thrones is over, I'll be going over and recommending quite a few of those shows on those platforms, so be prepared for that. And to help you get started, Surfshark VPN is offering to give you guys 84% off your purchase plus 1 month free as a bonus. And to get started, head on over to surfshark.com and use code RTR, or click the link in the description below and protect your privacy today. Next up we have here is Aegon's Conquest. According to this, that was being developed by Brian Cogman, but was ultimately passed on for being uneventful. HBO gave Brian and George the option to rework the script, but ultimately they refused. I am unaware of Brian's reason for refusing, but George stated that the events were already canon in his novels, and he would not change them to fit in with the TV universe. See, this seems more in line with something that could actually happen, and probably did happen. And I highly doubt George is as involved as they make it seem.
Yeah.
But Brian Cogman, didn't you say that he is probably the only one on the television show staff that's really all about
who gives a fuck? Yeah, he's the only one that gives a fuck. Yeah, uneventful. I mean that's an interesting word to use because it's like having reading through Fire and Blood and Aegon's Conquest and all of that. Like we know that stuff happens and a lot of stuff happens, but I think they're looking for some large-scale universal, things like the uneven seasons and the White Walkers and things and Birth of Dragons and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, what could happen in Aegon's Conquest that would excite viewers? We know he'd just keep conquering and conquering and conquering, and then that would be it.
And that makes sense. The whole uneventful thing, as someone who's read the books, and I am a diehard Thrones fan, I wouldn't say it's uneventful. But once again, they're not catering to diehard fans. They're catering to the casual fans, and the casual fans outnumber the diehard fans. And for casuals, why would they care about Aegon's Conquest of the Seven Kingdoms? If you've read the books and if you've read the Fire and Blood books, you already know what happens. So this will be another reason for the fans to bitch that they're not being faithful to the source material. Whereas the Long Night prequel, that takes place 8,000 years, they have the freedom to do whatever the fuck it is they want.
Whatever they want. Mm-hmm. You can build some characters. They can become, like, who's going, like, that's the thing is people watching the show, we kind of knew that the heroes are going to win. So it's like, who gets to kill the Night King? And it's like, is it going to be Jon? Well, it turns out it's not to be Jon. Who's going to sit the Iron Throne? With the Long Night, it could be like, who's going to be Azor Ahai? Who's going to be this first prophecy? Who's going to fulfill the prophecy to stop the White Walkers? Things like that. Mm-hmm. All that's unknown. So it's kind of the same story again, but nonetheless, with Aegon's Conquest, there's absolutely no surprises. We know that Aegon is just going to win. And that's the end,
Yeah, once again, it'd be a great like animated series. I would love to see it in the style of like what's on Netflix right now with Castlevania. I would love to see it in that style. It would be great. The original Spawn animated show from HBO. I don't know if you remember that one. I would love to see it in like that style. But what are you gonna do? Over here, next we have Dance of Dragons, and at this time, progression on the show has been very slow as George is devoting most of his time to the Long Night. However, the plot has already been detailed in the novels, and therefore major moments are already known. They are as followed: Aegon II's coronation, Rhaenyra's coronation, the death of Lucerys.
Yeah, sure. Lucerys. What? Yeah.
The death of Jaehaerys, numerous battles, the fall of King's Landing, the storming of the Dragon Pit, and the coronation of Aegon III. The show is meant to set up the War of Five Kings and will not use the same designs as Game of Thrones. I believe George R. R. Martin referenced this show recently in a blog post. So, Dance of Dragons, once again, I don't think HBO wants to throw out the dragon budget on a prequel that they don't know will be good or not.
Yeah, I mean, again, we run into the problem of all the characters looking the same, and we know where the story's going. I think Dance of the Dragons is going to be, the most interesting when it comes to complicated characters, interacting, backstabbing, things like that. But I think it would be too much CGI and all the humans looking the same and, not being able, I don't know. It's strange that HBO kind of wants, creative liberty. I guess they felt burned by the switch with Game of Thrones, how they had, they had source material and then all of a sudden they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know that switch was very hard to do. Well, if you have if you're allowed to have free reign, like with The Long Night, it's you're allowed to do whatever you want, invent stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Dance of the Dragons, I don't know, it would be a little, I don't know.
Out of everything listed here, Dance of the Dragons is the closest thing to Game of Thrones we have in terms of political struggle. Because the one thing I love about Game of Thrones is not the White Walkers, not Children of the Forest stuff. I know you love that stuff, but the one thing I really love is the political scheming and backstabbing. Littlefinger, Varys, I love that about season 1. And as time goes on, it becomes a little less. But that's why season 1 is my favorite, because it's about Ned trying to maneuver through the political bullshit and still trying to be his own guy, and he can't do it without getting burned. And I just love, one of my favorite scenes of all time is when Peter Baelish betrays Ned during the whole Joffrey throne room scene. He goes, "I did warn you not to try." I love that. I love the backstabbing. Yeah. I love the political stuff, and this is the closest thing we get to it.
Now, with the statement that the show is supposed to set up the War of the Five Kings, or I don't know how that connection can be made. What's really odd is The Long Night takes place 8,000 years before, and I see more connections between it and the events of Game of Thrones than I do the Dance of Dragons and Game of Thrones. With The Long Night, it's okay, we have Azor Ahai, the religion of R'hllor, the building of the wall, the White Walkers, all of that is still there. Founding of House Stark, whatever. With the Dance of the Dragons, you're talking about very specific fight between, factions in House Targaryen, and maybe some intrigue when it comes to the Faith of the Seven and the Citadel, which were hardly. The Faith of the Seven was somewhat dealt with the High Sparrow, but he was kind of a new faction coming in. But when I talk about Citadel conspiracies and things like that, and House Hightower and all of these other houses that didn't really, even appear in Game of Thrones, they're huge players in the Dance of the Dragons. When you say the importance of the other Targaryen houses in the Narrow Sea, the ones that they were never mentioned in Game of Thrones, and yet they're incredibly important in the Dance of the Dragons.
Once again, this seems like something that would a diehard fan would be excited over, but a casual fan, why would they care?
Right. It doesn't really seem to connect with me to the War of the Five Kings, or beyond. Except in these loose parallels between Rhaenyra and Daenerys and things like that. But the Aegon versus Rhaenyra is supposed to parallel whatever Jon and Dany. But other than that loose parallel, I can't see it really affecting things too much. Maybe why dragons. I guess it'd be interesting to maybe get into why dragons died, and why dragons would be reborn. That might connect together, but because those are two questions we don't know the answers to.
Next up here is Robert's Rebellion. This is the last of the spin-offs that is still being considered. At this stage, it will detail the following events: the tourney at Harrenhal, the abduction of Lyanna Stark, the murder of Brandon and Rickon Stark, the siege at Storm's End, the Battle of the Trident, the sack of King's Landing, and Robert's Ascension. Apparently, only Jaime Lannister will remain a central character to the show. It seems as though both Robert Baratheon and Howland Reed will be major characters as well. Like with the other shows, this will set up the War of Five Kings and will not feature designs from Game of Thrones, the most obvious hint to a reboot. So Robert's Rebellion is the one thing that I thought they were going to do. At least maybe not as quick as The Long Night, but maybe like 5 years down the line.
Right, I thought George was against it though.
Why? Why would he be against it?
I don't know. He somehow thought that this story was not that interesting or something. I don't know. I don't know why there was something. I'm not sure if it was George. Somebody was super against it. But there was a whole bunch of talk of it, and then people said no, Robert's Rebellion isn't happening. But I don't know.
Which is weird because a lot of the characters that we all love are prominent in it. Like everybody likes Ned, and you got your Cersei fans and your Jaime fans, and
Why does it say only Jaime Lannister will remain a central character? I mean, it seems, and then it says Robert Baratheon will be a major character. Like, well, wait a minute. Like, he was a major character in Game of Thrones too. I don't.
So Jaime will be a central character to the show, but Robert and Howland will be major characters. So I assume like how Jon Snow, the Big Six or Big Seven.
Yeah.
So, but Tywin is also there. He's a major character as well. Who else is a major character that's also there? I don't know. Roose Bolton is also a major character. Is he a central character? No, but it's still a major character, a major part of the show. Theon, not a central character, but is a major character. That makes sense?
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. Could Robert's Rebellion work? I don't know. I mean, Robert's Rebellion, it's 1 year, Like, how are they going to stretch that out over several seasons?
What they could do, and I'm the one peddling this. Because I love stuff like this. Love Black Mirrors. I used to like American Horror Story. I like the idea of American Horror Story. What they could do is to keep it fresh, they could have anthology series on the whole thing, because there are multiple stories, and with an anthology series, every season is a new thing, like American Horror Story. And with an anthology series, you can create your own stories and still do stuff that we've heard of before. Like, you could do season 1 Robert's Rebellion, season 2 maybe takes place several hundred years before, following some guy from House, I don't know, Mormont, on his quest to do this, and this, and you could have that freedom and still give the fans, diehard fans, what they want as well as introduce casuals to the history.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I mean, that would be nice, but I don't think they're going to do that, but that would be nice.
To wrap up the email here, numerous other shows have been pitched at HBO, but have not been given a chance to develop. I'm aware that Nymeria's War, Dunk and Egg, and a show in Yi-Ti. Am I saying that right? Yi-Ti?
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be a joke because it's E.T. the extraterrestrial.
A show in E.T. has been discussed. There have been other pitches, but I'm unsure what they're about. It seems unlikely more prequels will get greenlit due to the likelihood of a reboot for Game of Thrones. Now, I don't think there will be a Game of Thrones reboot. There's been far too much merchandise, far too much effort on that merchandise, and the DVDs and all this other crap, and so much money thrown at actors, and there's no way there's going to be a fucking reboot. Not in 50 years. There's no fucking way.
We as a society, we kind of scoffed at rebooting Spider-Man so quickly, and that's a freaking 2-hour movie. We're not rebooting multi-year show again. No, it's just not going to happen.
So the reason everybody's okay.
I also don't believe that anyone was talking about Nymeria's War or E.T. That's just way too obscure.
Yeah.
For anyone to have any interest in. People would be like, oh, a show on Dorne? You'd have one viewer, and that would be Preston Jacobs. I mean,
I mean, you're right.
I mean, no one's interested in Dorne. No one's interested in Nymeria's War. That would be ridiculous. No. Now, Dunk and Egg would be. It's funny because most fans say well, Dunk and Egg would be great because you're talking, they have a multi-year adventures. And it would they would flow really well, as Egg grew up, as he does in the stories. But for some reason, Dunk and Egg they never really pushed that. But it's too bad. I guess there's just not enough characters. It's not as epic. Dunk and Egg go to various places, and everything surrounds Dunk's perspective and Dunk's perspective alone. and so it's too bad. But Dunk and Egg would be fantastic.
I would be down with it. And like I said, the one thing that really irks me is that the whole Long Night prequel, I would be super excited for it had they done that thing that I've said this before, had they done that thing that you told me about during our spoiler cast podcast episode,
Yeah.
where Jon and Tormund go beyond the wall and they find the White Walker symbol there, and that's how the show ends, which sets up the Long Night perfectly as to why it's happening all over again. What are the White Walkers? Like, how do they really come about? Why does it take them, so long to come out? Why do they choose right now to come out? Like, their relationship against the Raven and why they always go for the Raven. It's just a missed opportunity to really just hype everybody up for the prequel. It really is. Because I'm not that hyped for this. I don't care about White Walkers. I really don't. I like more of the political struggle.
Because we know Arya kills them all. So what's the do we need rocks? Do we like ice cream? Does that mean I have to eat rock salt? No, don't you want to see Boba Fett as a kid? No. I like Boba Fett. I don't want Boba Fett as a kid.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you were in charge of the whole thing, if what you wanted to happen is what they will do, what would be your idea for a prequel series? Or even a sequel series?
I mean, I would push Dunk and Egg. I don't think, the more I read about the Long Night, the more I think wow, they're it's like when I first heard that idea, I was like, I don't know, that doesn't seem that great. And then I realized that the scope is huge. I'm like, oh, it's all over the world. This is interesting. I wonder what they're going to do. I wonder how they're going to connect that all together. I think another one that I thought that might have been interesting was the travels of Oberyn Martell, because he has a fascinating life and he kind of goes from place to place, and so you could do a lot with him. Anybody else? I mean, you could do the Wandering Wolf, as he travels and joins the Second Sons and travels around Essos and things like that.
Someone was
as a Stark.
Someone was saying how they would love what Harry Potter did with their prequel, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, where in Harry Potter, what's the guy's name? Newt Scamander.
Yeah.
He apparently he's the subject of a history book they were reading in the original Harry Potter stuff, and thus it seems so random and obscure that they would focus on Newt of all people. But I guess Newt does meet up with younger versions of characters we see in the main movies. So someone was saying how they should do that and go with what's the guy's name? Lomas Longstrider?
Oh right, Lomas Longstrider. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Who goes around and sees all the
has all these adventures. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sees all the wonders. That would be very interesting. Or you could do Gary and Lannister. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do.
Isn't Gary and Lannister the guy who disappears in the Smoking Sea?
Oh yeah.
But he dies. We think.
Well, we have no idea what he does. So it could any of that could happen. But yeah, you could have one of these traveling characters, whether it be Oberyn Martell or the Wandering Wolf or Gary and Lannister. There's definitely stuff to be had.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, like I said, I think this email is a bunch of bullshit, but it's giving us an excuse. It's giving us an excuse to talk about the prequels again. I'm sure people are sick of it, but I wanted to discuss it one last time, especially after the Thrones finale, which...
Right. I mean, it looks like only the Long Night is going to make it. Mm-hmm. I don't think HBO is putting their eggs in more than one basket. I don't think that they're saying, oh, let's have all of these shows. They like to have a diverse programming.
Yeah.
And, I think they know that they can't have two Game of Thrones shows on at the same time. I mean, I'm saying that, and yet there was a time in which 3 Star Trek shows were on at the same time. And people got, it's too much. So, I think they're savvy enough to know. Maybe I'm wrong.
And to what you said earlier about Spider-Man, I think the reason people are okay with them rebooting Spider-Man every single time is because Spider-Man in the comics, there's multiple multiple universes where Spider-Man's a different person every time.
Yeah.
So, there's one universe where it's Peter Parker, another universe where it's Gwen Stacy, another universe where it's Miles Morales. So
now what they could also try to do is they could try to pull what Netflix did with Daredevil and Jessica Jones. It only had, it was mixed success with the Defenders, right? What they were trying to do on the small screen was the same as what they did with the Avengers movie, right? That you have you first have a Captain America movie, and then you have an Iron Man movie, a Captain America movie, a Thor movie, and then you have a movie where they're all together, right? You could do the same thing, like have a small series of something happening in one place of the world, and then something happening in another place of the world, and then another place of the world, and then have them all like come together in one sort of event at the end, or a series where they're all combined. That'd be interesting, though. I think it would be a lot. I don't know if Netflix considers like their shared universe, like the Defenders, a success.
I think I would argue the only really good Daredevil, all seasons of Daredevil were great. Season 1 of Jessica Jones was okay. Luke Cage, meh. Iron Fist, awful. Defenders, not that good, honestly. So
I liked Jessica Jones the most. I thought Daredevil was okay. I thought the first half of Luke Cage season 1 was excellent, and then the second half of Luke Cage season 1 was horrible.
The problem with it is, and this is why I refuse to watch a lot of shows that have more than like 10 to 13 episodes. It's that bloat. That Netflix bloat is fucking atrocious. And a lot of shows love to do this. Netflix's bottom line, same as YouTube is, they love longer videos. They love longer episodes and more episodes to keep you on the service longer. And that's their bottom line. And as such, sometimes the show can suffer because of it. That's why Jessica Jones season 2, horrendous, awful.
Huh? I didn't
oh
see
my
that,
God, save your time.
Season 1 was so good though.
Season 1 was all right, but how many times can you fucking kidnap Kilgrave and let him go? You know what I'm saying? Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, so this reminds me of Well, that's the thing, is they did kind of blow their load, right? So Jessica Jones, it was all building up to Jessica Jones and Kilgrave like meeting, and then and facing off. But they keep meeting over and over again, and by the third time that they meet, you're like, the intensity is gone because somebody has plot armor or somebody gets out of it. It's just too many times. I was watching I watched the first season of Killing Eve, and it was the same. Like, Killing Eve is the story where Sandra Oh is in the British intelligence, and she's tracking down this really compelling, insane hit woman, and the hit woman is in turn obsessed with Eve, Sandra Oh's character, and you're like building up to like, oh my God, like as these, the story is like chugging along, and it's like two characters, like plot lines are coming together, and then they come together, and then they have, ridiculous plot armor, and then they come together again, and you're like, oh God, and then by the third time they're together, you're like, oh, it's just, the intensity is gone. So I guess that's what I felt about Jessica Jones. Like, you can't blow it. If you're going to be building towards something, you need to have a single climax, at the end. But oh well, whatever.
We got off track, but Preston, you want to wrap this up?
Sure thing.
Guys.
But no, I mean, I'm going to say before we wrap it up, but it does relate to a lot of things about, like, all storytelling and game, and this is going to get to Game of Thrones as well. Like, are people going to be excited about dragons and the White Walkers and everything when everything's already been revealed? When you're supposed to be building towards something, and then once you kind of have that climax, like, is there any excitement after it? Well, we've had the climax to Game of Thrones, like, so how can we be excited about these other things? Well, we'll see.
They can do it. I'm curious to see if the prequel will go anywhere, and I hope it fucking does, because once again, I love Thrones. I think the first 4 or 5 seasons were great. So hopefully they can do their own thing with enough freedom, you know, because HBO doesn't put out crap. They really don't.
No.
A good chunk of
cautiously optimistic about the long run.
yeah, like
I am. Yeah, every time I hear it, the more I hear about it, the more I'm intrigued.
yeah, HBO. A good chunk of their stuff is good. But the problem with HBO is the longer it continues, the more downhill it goes. So we'll just have to see.
Like everything.
Like everything.
Like all human beings.
Mm-hmm. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Preston, thank you for joining me. Join us again on Preston's channel, where we discuss the entirety of Season 8, and then again on Preston's channel when we have a live stream. You still want to do the live stream?
Yeah. Let's do a live.
We'll do a live stream with Phil the Issues Guy, and we'll invite another Game of Thrones YouTuber, a good friend of ours, Tony Teflon, if he's available. We'll have him on, and the 4 of us will discuss, bitch about, and talk about the future of Thrones. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.